Chapter 5802. Big brother, you left the family without saying anything back then. I've been looking for you. But there was no news at all. I'm so happy now. I wasn't interested in this ancient battlefield, but I didn't expect to see you here. Everything was worth it. Fourth brother, I'm no longer a member of the Huangfu family. Just forget about me, and pretend that you never had a big brother like me. Huangfu Ting's eyes dimmed. He had always understood how important he was in Huangfu Chen's heart. Even though the entire family was extremely disappointed that he had awakened the dark force, Huangfu Chen had never cared about this from the beginning to the end. Over the years, he had long become indifferent to the Huangfu family, and even subconsciously erased his former identity. However, Huangfu Chen had always been a person in the depths of his memory. At least he had a younger brother, who had never betrayed him. Whenever he felt despair because he could not see the light of day, he would always think of this sunny face in front of him. That was his spiritual pillar to persevere, because he hoped that one day he could reunite with the family he recognized. Now that he was cultivating with Bewitching, and knew that he was going to establish the Dark Sacred Assembly, it was an unprecedented hope. He hoped that one day he could stand in front of the Huangfu family, and let them understand that there was no problem with the dark force. He could also become an outstanding cultivator. Big brother, don't talk nonsense. Huangfu Chen was a little anxious. I know everyone's attitude towards you is very bad, but that's them. In my heart, you've always been that outstanding big brother. Fourth brother, don't be silly. Huangfu Gang walked over. Do you think he's still the dazzling peerless genius from back then? Feel his aura. His current cultivation is still inferior to yours. A dark attribute cultivator is destined to be abandoned by the upper realm. If you still want to be his follower like back then, you're courting death. Huangfu Gang's every word stabbed Huangfu Ting's heart like a sharp blade. The humiliating and sullen scene from back then seemed to appear before his eyes again. No one knew what kind of disdain and discrimination he had endured back then. Wasn't the arrogant Huangfu Gang in front of him like a follower back then? The affairs of the world were just so unpredictable, making people sigh with emotion. Huangfu Gang, I respect you as my second brother, but don't go too far with your words. Huangfu Chen glared at him. If Big Brother hadn't awakened the darkness attribute, would you have your current position? Don't forget, you couldn't compare to my big brother back then. Bang! Huangfu Gang unceremoniously punched Huangfu Chen in the face. Wake up and figure out who you're talking to. You! Huangfu Chen was furious. Just as he was about to explode, Huangfu Ting stood in front of him and looked at Huangfu Gang calmly. Fourth brother is still young and doesn't know any better. You don't have to be so calculative with him. Huangfu Gang chuckled. Huangfu Ting, you're no longer a member of the Huangfu clan. Don't flatter yourself. What right do you have to call him fourth brother? Sensing Huangfu Gang's arrogant attitude, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others frowned. Chapter 5803. Huangfu Ting was once the next patriarch of the Huangfu family. As the second young master of the Huangfu family, Huangfu Gang had always been shrouded in the halo of Huangfu Ting. It was not until Huangfu Ting left the family that he took over Huangfu Ting's previous position and became the current young master. Morong Jing knew that Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen had just arrived in the upper realm and did not know much about the Huangfu family. So he took the initiative to introduce them. After hearing this introduction, Bailey Hongzhuang completely understood. It turned out that there was hatred between the two of them. So at this moment they were speaking so impolitely. Even though there were many things that she did not know, she could guess from Huangfu Gang's appearance at this moment that he was shrouded in the halo of Huangfu Ting. How depressed and jealous he was. Even though he had everything now, he was still unwilling to let go. Just when everyone thought that Huangfu Ting could not help but lose his temper, he remained calm, and did not even show any anger on his face. That's right, I was wrong. I'll leave now, okay? Even though Huangfu Ting was very tolerant, the jealousy in Huangfu Gang's eyes did not dissipate. You've disappeared for so many years. I thought you had died long ago. Now it seems that you've been able to live until now, because of your ability to be a coward. TSK, it's really interesting. At the same time, the cultivators of the Huangfu family could not help but chuckle. Feeling the strange gazes of everyone, Huang Futing could not help but clench his hands. He deliberately tolerated it not because he was afraid of Huang Fugang, but because he did not want to implicate Di Baichen because of his own affairs. He understood that Di Baichen was a very loyal person. If he had a conflict with Di Baichen now, he would definitely not sit idly by. However, he did not want Di Baichen to make an enemy of the Huangfu family. He was very grateful to Di Baichen because he had brought him endless hope. Everyone looked at Huang Futing, who was so tolerant. It was hard to imagine that such an arrogant person could be like this now. It inexplicably made them feel a little distressed. How glorious were you back then? No one was in your eyes. Now, you actually appeared here with a group of mercenaries. If it weren't for the mercenary guild discovering the ancient battlefield first, I'm afraid you wouldn't even have the chance to experience it. You're really down and out. Huang Fugang sized up Huang Futing and the cultivators behind Huang Futing, and his eyes were filled with disdain. I don't think you're that great. If it wasn't for Huang Futing's awakening dark attribute, you would be nothing in the Huangfu family now. Bailey Hongzhuang stood up, her cold eyes filled with disgust. You're the one who took advantage of him when he left. You should at least express some gratitude. Now that you're so aggressive, are you trying to prove that you're stronger than him? Linger sneered. Why didn't I see you so arrogant when I was in the Huangfu family? You're really a villain intoxicated by success. The sudden sarcasm stunned Huang Fugang. After noticing that there were two peerless beauties standing up for Huang Futing, he was a little shocked. Oh, I really didn't know that you were quite popular with women. Are they also from the mercenary guild? Huang Fugang asked. Chapter 5804. After listening to Nangong Yuqing's introduction, Huang Fugang looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a different expression. No wonder he felt that Bailey Hongzhuang looked familiar, but he had never seen such a beauty before. Only now did he remember that he had seen a portrait of the Saint of Light. He never thought that the real person would appear in front of him. The Saint of Light? Huang Fuchen was pleasantly surprised. Although he had never seen the Saint of Light before, he had heard many rumors about her. In a short time after coming to the upper realm, she had already gained a firm foothold, and no one could compare to her in terms of the light attribute. Such a legendary woman had appeared in front of him, and was even speaking up for his brother. He felt that his brother's life was not as miserable as Huang Fugang had described. Huang Fugang's eyes flickered with a bit of embarrassment, but his attitude was no longer as unscrupulous as before. No matter who it was, they had to be wary of the power of the Holy Assembly. Saint of Light, I didn't know your identity and was a bit rude. I hope you can forgive me. Huang Fugang cupped his hands apologetically. If Bailey Hongzhuang had not seen Huang Fugang's face before, she might not have taken his words to heart. But now that she knew what kind of person Huang Fugang was, she could only say those words out of consideration for his feelings. Huang Futing was her friend. No matter what his identity was, she could not accept that Huang Fugang had bullied his friend. Moreover, it was impossible for such people to become friends. You don't have to be so courteous now. After all, we are already on opposing sides. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Huang Fugang indifferently. Her hostile attitude was particularly obvious. Huang Fugang frowned. He did not expect that Bailey Hongzhuang would not give him any face. No matter what, he was the young master of the Huangfu family. On the contrary, Huang Futing was just a has-been. She actually chose to stand on Huang Futing's side. I have long heard that the Huangfu family is a great family, but looking at you now, I feel that the Huangfu family is just a facade. Di Baichen looked coldly at Huang Fugang. Ever since this guy appeared, he had been very unhappy. You don't have the slightest bit of affection for your own big brother. You're so overbearing and even mocking him. If you were heartless back then because of the power of darkness, I think it would be difficult for you to even leave the Huangfu family alive. As soon as he said this, everyone could not help but laugh. Di Baichen was still as sharp-tongued as ever. He did not give the other party any face. Huang Fugang's face was full of haze. Di Baichen, right? This is our family's business of the Huangfu family. You have no right to interfere. Didn't you just say that Huang Futing has nothing to do with your family? How can you say it's a family matter now? Di Baichen asked. Huang Fugang was stunned. His face turned awkward as he said angrily, "In short, this is our business. It's none of your business." "Then you are wrong." Bewitching shook his head and put a hand on Huang Futing's shoulder. "He is my friend. His business is my business. If you provoke him, it is the same as provoking me." Huang Futing's body stiffened slightly. A warm current flowed through his heart. Whether it was Bailey Hongzhuang who stood out first, or Bewitching who now regarded him as a brother, they both made him feel extremely warm. Chapter 5805. Huang Fugang looked at the scene in front of him in disbelief, thinking that Bewitching and the Holy Maiden had gone crazy. Anyone who wasn't a fool wouldn't choose to stand on Huang Futing's side at this time. On one side was the young master of the Huangfu family, and on the other side was a dark attribute cultivator with no future. However, these two people chose Huang Futing without hesitation. Were they crazy? Nangong Yuqing could understand Huang Fugang's thoughts at this moment. If this happened to someone else, he would find it strange, but when it happened to Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang, he didn't find it strange at all. These two people had always acted like this, even when they chose to help Ao Lingxiao. However, the end result proved that they were right, and Ao Lingxiao was wrongly accused. Madmen, these people were madmen to begin with. In the past, it was only them, but now, even Morong Jing and Jiang Wenyan had become part of it. "Huang Futing, I didn't see how capable you were." Huang Fugang's eyes were cold. "I don't know what's so good about you. Apart from Huang Fuchun and that slut, you've also attached yourself to the Radiant Sacred Assembly and the young master of the D family. Bailey Hongzhuang, you are the Holy Maiden of the Radiant Sacred Assembly, yet you're protecting a dark attribute cultivator. Aren't you afraid that the Radiant Sacred Assembly will punish you?" Huang Fugang's eyes shone as he looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Others were fine, but light and darkness were irreconcilable. As the Holy Maiden of Light, she actually dared to collude with a dark attribute cultivator. Wasn't she just seeking her own death? "You don't have to worry about that. I know what I'm doing very well." Bailey Hongzhuang's attitude was unrestrained, still as calm as before. "I think you've been in seclusion for too long, so you don't know much about the outside world. So what if I'm the Holy Maiden of the Radiant Sacred Assembly? My husband is a dark attribute cultivator. Do you think I'll be afraid?" "What?" Huang Fugang couldn't help but raise his voice, his startled eyes wandering between Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang. Then he suddenly said, "I was wondering why you were with Huang Futing. So you're both of the dark attribute." "Huang Fugang, how is Wanner now?" Huang Futing, who had remained calm all this time, suddenly became agitated. He quickly walked forward and rushed before Huang Fugang. His pitch-black eyes were bloodshot as he stared at the latter, as if he was suppressing his endless emotions. "You mean that bitch?" Huang Fugang raised his eyebrows. "Uffs." Huang Fugang didn't expect that Huang Futing, who had been enduring silently, would dare to attack him at this moment. He couldn't dodge in time, and took a solid punch. Huang Fugang took 2 steps back. His resolute face seemed to be set ablaze, and his eyes turned red. He fiercely punched Huang Futing's face. "You dare hit me? After that bitch married me. I know she still misses you in her heart." Huang Fugang hit Huang Futing madly. "What's so good about a guy like you? I've been so good to her. Why is she still thinking about you? Since you've already left, why are you still haunting me? Isn't it better to just die?" Huang Fugang roared, his blood-red eyes filled with endless anger. Bai Li Yanche wanted to pull Huang Fugang away, but was stopped by Bewitching. Chapter 5806. Even if Huang Futing wasn't Huang Fugang's match, this kind of power wouldn't take his life. It would only cause physical pain. Although everyone didn't like Huang Fugang's smug look, it seemed that the grudge between the two wasn't simple. There was even a woman involved. From Huang Fugang's roar, everyone understood that the woman was the most important reason for the grudge between the two. The two brothers fell in love with the same woman, but that woman loved Huang Futing. It was originally an excellent arrangement, but fate made a fool of her, and she married Huang Fugang. Perhaps this was the helplessness of a big family. Facing Huang Fugang's fist, Huang Futing didn't retaliate. The fist smashed on the face. It was very painful, but it couldn't compare to the pain in his heart. When he left the family, the most painful thing was this. Even if Wanner begged him to take her away, he couldn't do that. He didn't even have a future for himself, let alone a future for Wanner. Even now, he didn't feel that his decision was wrong. He knew very well how he had come through all these years. If it wasn't for the unyielding belief supporting him, he might have really disappeared from this world long ago. However, when he heard the news about Wanner, he was still so heartbroken. Once they were innocent, Wanner had always believed in him and worshipped him. It was already very close to their wedding date, but at that time, his talent awakened. When Huang Futing's face was covered in blood, Huang Fugang finally stopped. Look at yourself now. Do you still have the high spirits from back then? Huang Fugang's face was expressionless. Instead of living like this, I might as well just die. Huang Futing didn't speak. He struggled to get up from the ground. His eyes were dim, but the determination in his eyes never wavered. After venting, Huang Fugang didn't seem to be willing to say anything more. Facing the gazes of Bewitching and the others, his expression changed slightly. He didn't expect himself to be unable to control his emotions at this time. Let's go. Huang Fugang waved his hand and led the cultivators of the Huangfu family forward. They're leaving just like that? I thought there would be a big fight. Xiaohe shook her feet and said as if the world wasn't in chaos. Huang Fuqin did not leave with them. Instead, he stood firmly beside Huang Futing. Big brother, just let me go with you. Ever since you left, there's no point in me staying in the family. Everyone follows second brother, but I don't like him, Huang Fuqin said gloomily. A trace of a smile appeared on the corners of Huang Futing's mouth. Don't be silly. Look at me now. Could it be that you want to fall into such a state as well? Your cultivation talent has always been very good. Only in the clan can you receive the best training. Is it really that important to have a high cultivation base? I think living happily is the most important thing. Huang Fuqin's expression was firm. Big brother, you still don't understand that strength and the future are not the most important thing. I know you left for Sister Wanner's sake, but do you know? Ever since you left, I haven't seen Sister Wanner smile. Second brother treats her well, but I know that she's not happy at all, let alone happy. Huang Fuqian's words caused Huang Futing's heart to tremble. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Was he wrong? Chapter 5807. Faced with Huang Fuqian's question, Di Beichen and the others fell silent. From Huang Futing's point of view, they felt that he was right. But from Miss Wanner's point of view, perhaps this was the decision she didn't want to see the most. Big brother, I've respected and worshipped you since I was young. Even after you left the clan for so many years, my thoughts have never changed. I feel that a man shouldn't make a woman sad. If you can't even do this, then don't call yourself a man. Huang Fuqian's words were fierce, and his emotions were even more agitated. He had searched for Huang Futing for so long and finally met him. This time, he had to try his best to persuade him. Otherwise, if he missed this opportunity, he didn't know when they would meet again in the future. Huang Futing remained silent. Huang Fuqian's words had given him too much shock, including what Huang Fugang had said earlier. All of this reminded him of the past. Seeing this, Huang Fuqin couldn't help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang. Although it was the first time they had met, he knew that Bailey Hongzhuang would help Huang Futing. Miss Bailey, you're a woman. I believe you understand a woman's thoughts the best. If you were Sister Wanner, what would you choose? Bailey Hongzhuang didn't expect Huang Fuqin to turn the question to her in the blink of an eye. For a moment, even Huang Futing looked at her. After a while, Bailey Hongzhuang said, I don't know about your situation in the past, but for a woman, nothing else is more important than being with the person she loves. There were many types of women in the world. Some valued the future more, some valued relationships more, but none of them were wrong. She had never met Miss Wanner and didn't know her true thoughts. However, judging from what Huang Fuqin said, Miss Wanner should be deeply in love with Huang Futing. Even though Huang Futing had left the clan for so long, her thoughts hadn't changed. This proved that she valued her relationship with Huang Futing more. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Huang Futing's body trembled, and his gaze became even more complicated. Even if he didn't say anything, everyone could feel the sadness that came from his heart. It was a type of pain and sorrow that spread from the bottom of his heart and went deep into his bones. It was even to the extent that it was impossible to express with words. It carried boundless regret, yet he was powerless to do anything about it. Huang Fuchen tugged at Huang Futing's shirt. "Big brother, did you hear that?" Huang Futing raised his head, his eyes sparkling. "Fourth brother, she's already married." Hearing this, Huang Fuchen was startled and could not help but loosen his grip. "That's right. Even if Sister Won'er's heart hasn't changed, she is still married. Big brother, you know that it's just a marriage alliance. It's a marriage alliance that has no other choice." But in the end they got married. Huang Futing lowered his eyes. His entire being was in desolation. Everything that had happened in the past could no longer be rewritten. Even if he knew what Won'er was thinking, it was too late. Everyone fell into silence. This situation was indeed very difficult to resolve. Even if they were not married, as long as Miss Won'er was willing to elope with Huang Futing, they could still be together. However, if they eloped under such circumstances, they would really have to bear a bad reputation and not be able to face anyone. Chapter 5808. Bailey Hongzhuang and Linger looked at each other. They knew too well that as a woman, it would be unbearable for her to bear such infamy. "Master, I'm afraid this matter is uncertain." Xiaohe sighed. Although she often wished for the world to be in chaos, in this kind of matter, she hoped to see the lovers get married. She originally thought that it was still very possible for Huang Futing and Miss Won'er to be together. After all, in her opinion, dark attribute cultivators had a very bright future. Even if the cultivators in the upper realm had not accepted them yet, she believed that it was only a matter of time. After the Dark Sacred Assembly was established, everyone's opinion would gradually change. As long as Huang Futing was no longer in a state of being looked down upon, with his ability, he could give Miss Won'er a very good future. However, just getting married was already an insurmountable chasm. Even if their hearts were together, it was impossible for them to be together all the time. Huang Fuchen fell into silence. He was thinking that if he saw his big brother, he and Sister Won'er would leave with him. To him, the family did not make him reluctant to leave. In fact, in the past, he was also full of a sense of belonging to the family. However, when he saw how cruelly the family treated his big brother, he felt that everything seemed to be a little different from his judgment. In such a heartless family, there was no point in staying any longer. On the contrary, it was not necessarily impossible to go out and explore. He did not care about anything else. He just followed his heart. It was not until this moment that he realized that he had thought too simply. It turned out that everything was different from before. Even if he wanted to leave, it would not be so easy. "Fourth brother, if you still don't come, then you can stay by yourself." Huang Fugang's voice came from the front. Huang Fuchun subconsciously looked forward, and a trace of hesitation flashed in his eyes. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. He took out something from his storage ring. "Big brother, Sister Won'er said that if I see you, I must give this to you." "What is this?" Huang Futing looked at the brocade pouch in his hand in confusion. Huang Fuchen shook his head. "I don't know. Sister Won'er said that before I see you, she won't let me open it. Only you can see it." Huang Futing didn't hesitate to open the pouch right away. He hadn't seen Won'er for a long time. Before he left, he didn't even take their keepsake. No matter what it was, staying by his side was just a thought. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others did not pay too much attention to it. They guessed that it was a letter from Won'er to Huang Futing. After leaving, he had never seen her again. His longing for her should have been recorded in this letter. However, when he saw the contents of the paper, he suddenly took 2 steps back. His emotions became agitated in an instant, and tears flowed out of his eyes. Everyone couldn't help but be stunned as they looked at Huang Futing, who'd suddenly had a great change in mood, and they looked at each other. They were completely unable to understand exactly what was written on this piece of paper to cause him to have such a breakdown. Could it be that what was written on it was not her longing and worry for him, but a heartless letter? Chapter 5809. Huang Futing didn't answer. He slowly squatted down and ran his hands through his hair. His eyes were already filled with tears. The gentle and kind girl from back then kept appearing in his mind. He had seen her often since he was very young. Because their families were friends, they had cultivated together since they were young and experienced together. At first, they didn't understand the feelings between men and women, but later on, they developed feelings for each other. Everything was so natural. Perhaps their feelings for each other had not experienced any great storms, but in their eyes, this kind of long-term relationship was more sincere. When he chose to leave, he was very pained. Even when Warner cried and begged him to take her away, he didn't agree. He thought that after a long time, Warner would gradually forget about him. But now it seemed that he thought too simply. Warner was never a fickle girl. Most importantly, he never thought that Warner would do this for him. Big brother, what did Sister Warner give you? Huang Fuchen was puzzled. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure out what could make Huang Futing fall into such emotions. He took the paper from Huang Futing's hand, but when he saw the two bright red words at the top, he was stunned on the spot. His face was full of shock. A letter of divorce. Those two big words were clearly a letter of divorce. It's a letter of divorce. How is this possible? Although he knew that Sister Warner had always been thinking about his big brother, he also understood his second brother's feelings for Sister Warner. Logically speaking, it was absolutely impossible for his second brother to write a letter of divorce. As soon as Huang Fuchen finished speaking, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others understood what was going on. Heavens, it's a letter of divorce. Xiaohei was stunned. So this means that Miss Wan has already made up her mind to leave with Huang Futing? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. She was inexplicably shocked and touched. It seems that Miss Warner really has deep feelings for him. In order to be with him, she has already prepared everything. Bai Li Yanche frowned slightly. Isn't it said that Huang Fugang likes Warner very much? Why would he write a letter of divorce? Sometimes, it's even more painful to have her as a person, but not her heart. Jiang Wenyin sighed emotionally. When Huang Fugang made an appearance earlier, Shi kept feeling that Huang Fugang was too overbearing, petty. However, he now understood why Huang Fugang treated Huang Futing like that. Perhaps it wasn't because of his darkness attribute, nor was it because Huang Fugang couldn't compare to Huang Futing back then, and wanted to show off in front of him. The real reason was that the person he loved had fallen in love with Huang Futing. Especially when he saw that Huang Futing could not compare to him at all. Yet he was still able to capture the heart of the person he loved. This kind of pain might not be any lighter than what Huang Futing had endured all these years. It was torture in the heart. Big brother, this is indeed second brother's handwriting. Huang Fuchen looked at the divorce letter carefully, and turned to look at Huang Futing. Chapter 58:10. Huang Futing nodded slightly. He had recognized Huang Fugang's handwriting when he saw the words divorce letter. In fact, he had seen how much Huang Fugang liked Warner back then. He had always been willing to give up many things to Huang Fugang, but he could not give up on Warner. Suddenly, he understood why Huang Fugang had beaten him so fiercely. Perhaps it was because of the unwillingness in his heart, or perhaps it was because of his current miserable state. Big brother, Sister Warner gave you this divorce letter. Does that mean you two can be together? Mengxing asked. All of their helplessness and despair had been resolved with this divorce letter. In fact, he knew very well that although Sister Warner had married his second brother, she had always lived alone in a place. Normally, she would be in closed-door cultivation. She almost never had the chance to see his second brother. They were just husband and wife in name. Huang Futing fell into hesitation. In this situation, he did not know what would happen if Warner followed him. Most importantly, if Warner's family knew what she was doing, they would definitely be furious. Not only Warner, but even Huang Fugang might be severely punished for writing such a divorce letter. After seeing Huang Futing hesitate, Di Beichen suddenly said, Huang Futing, since Miss Warner is prepared to abandon everything as a man, could it be that you are not as courageous as a woman? That's right. You are a dignified man. She has done so much for you. If you still betray her, then don't blame me for looking down on you. Morong Jing could not help but speak up. He still remembered the first time he saw Huang Futing. He was so high-spirited. Even if he stood in front of a group of outstanding cultivators, he was still a person who could not be ignored. However, the current him was far too different from before. Although he understood that it had not been easy for him all these years, as a man, he should bear the responsibility that he should bear. If it was him, if a woman was willing to do this for him, then even if he had to give up his life, he would definitely take her far away. You have to be brave. Only when she is with you will she feel happy. Bailey Hongzhuang also spoke up. She had yet to meet this Miss Wan but her heart was already filled with deep admiration. So far, she had never seen a girl who dared to love and hate like this. Even if she had to bear the infamy of the world, even if she had to abandon her family, she was still willing. She understood that this was definitely not the result of a moment of impulse. Huang Futing had left the family for so many years. In these years, Wan had probably thought of all the consequences thousands of times. She must have spent a lot of effort just to get this divorce letter. After so many years, she didn't even know if Huang Futing was still alive, but she still did all of this. What an admirable woman she was. Huang Futing raised his head and looked at the crowd in front of him. Although everyone's words were not very polite, he knew in his heart that everyone was cheering for him. Everyone was supporting him. At this moment, he had also erased his cowardly self from his heart. He could no longer hide like a coward. He had to face it bravely. Chapter 58:11. Everyone watched as Huang Futing stood up, his dark eyes fixed on everyone. His eyes were overflowing with brilliance, blooming with an unprecedented dazzling light. A warm smile bloomed on his heroic face. He suddenly turned around, his voice firm and serious. "Fourth brother, do me a favor." "Big brother, tell me." Huang Fuchen nodded hurriedly. He seemed to have guessed what Huang Futing was going to say next, and the corners of his lips had already risen quietly. "When you go back, find a way to take Wan away. I will wait for you in Emperor Cloud City." "Okay." Huang Fuchen solemnly agreed, his bright eyes shining like unpolished jade. "Big brother, don't worry. I will definitely bring Sister Wan to you. When the time comes, you can't drive me away." Huang Futing laughed heartily, the haze in his eyes completely dispersing. Wan's actions had brought him endless strength. In the past he had no future, but now he saw hope. Even if he was abandoned by his family, so what? He would stand up again. He would become the dazzling Huang Futing of the past. Since the family didn't give them a way out, he would create a bright path for Wan himself. "Don't worry. As long as you are willing to stay, I will never drive you away." Looking at the bright Huang Futing, Huang Fuchen only felt that his old big brother had returned. Good. Huang Fuchen couldn't hide his joy. "When we leave the ancient battlefield, I will quickly go to Emperor Cloud City. Hurry up and catch up with the team now." Huang Futing chuckled. "Okay." Huang Fuchen nodded and was about to leave when Huang Futing suddenly placed a Qingquan bag in his hand. "This thing is helpful for cultivation. Take it with you. Big brother, you need cultivation resources more than me." Somewhere in his heart trembled deeply. Huang Fuchen's voice suddenly became hoarse. His big brother had always treated him like this, always thinking of him when he had good things. Until now this hadn't changed. "Don't worry about me, I'm fine now." Huang Futing subconsciously looked at Bewitching. It was this excellent man in front of him who brought hope to the dark cultivators. "Take it." Huang Fuchen looked at the Qingquan bag in his hand, then looked deeply at Huang Futing. His smile was as bright as the sun. "Big brother, thank you." In the next moment, Huang Fuchen turned around swiftly. His steps were light and quick, because he could finally put down the stone that had been weighing on his heart for many years. "Thank you," Huang Futing said as he looked at everyone. In the past, he had never had the courage to take this step, but everyone's words had completely awakened him. Morong Jing placed a hand on Huang Futing's shoulder. "Huang Futing, actually, I'm quite envious of you. It's rare for a woman to be so sincere to you. You must not let her down." Huang Futing nodded. "I understand. I've let her down in the past, but I won't do it again." "That's good." Smiles appeared on everyone's faces. Seeing such a result, everyone felt sincerely happy. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but think of Huang Fugang's angry scene from before. He must have been very painful all these years. Bailey Hongzhuang looked up at Bewitching. Her gentle voice carried a sigh. Beichen, my opinion of Huang Fugang has suddenly changed. Did he think it through long ago and let go? Chapter 58:12. Bailey Hongzhuang's smile was like a flower as she nodded. Me too. She understood that Huang Fugang was not as heartless as they had thought. He definitely loved Wan'er deeply, but he was unwilling and angry to deal with Huang Futing. But there was no hatred. Otherwise, if he was really narrow-minded, he would rather kill Huang Futing than give the two of them a chance to be together. That outburst just now was him putting an end to everything that had happened in the past. After Nangong Yuqing left with Huang Fugang's group, he felt that something was wrong. He felt that there must be a reason why Di Beichen's group stayed there. He wanted to stay and find out what was going on, but he just inexplicably left with the Huangfu family. He had been in the ancient battlefield for so long, but he hadn't gained anything. According to his understanding, Di Beichen's group was very lucky. If they had gained something, wouldn't it be a pity to miss it? Just as he was thinking about how to tell Huang Fugang about this, Huang Fuchen's figure suddenly caught up from behind. Huang Fugang felt the footsteps and turned his head to look, but he didn't say anything. Brother Huangfu, don't you think it's strange that Di Beichen's group gathered there? Nangong Yuqing lowered his voice. I think there might be something we don't know. We've been in the ancient battlefield for so long, but besides the pavilion at the center of the lake, we haven't gained anything. It's strange that Di Beichen's group seems to be very lucky. Look, the inheritance of the pavilion at the center of the lake fell into the hands of their friends. At this moment, Han Bowen led the disciples of the Blue Cloud sect and arrived nearby. When he heard the name Di Beichen, his eyes lit up. As far as he knew, Jiang Wenyan and Bailey Hongzhuang had already met up with Di Beichen. Although everyone said that they had died in the lake, in his opinion, as long as he didn't see their corpses, they might still be alive. Although he was forced to give up, he was still thinking about the treasure. Brother Nangong. Han Bowen greeted him with a smile. After Nangong Yuqing noticed Han Bowen and the others, his expression also changed. His calm face revealed a bit of caution and vigilance. Brother Han, it's rare to see you take the initiative to greet me. Brother Nangong, it's been so long since that incident. There's really no need to take it to heart. What do you think? Han Bowen had a smile on his face. Back then we were all young and immature. Moreover, it's inevitable to have some small conflicts during training. Nangong Yuqing narrowed his eyes, a trace of haze flashing through his black pupils. They had a conflict in the early years, so he didn't have a good impression of him. Now that this fellow had taken the initiative to make peace, he must have some purpose. Otherwise, with this fellow's character, it was impossible for him to take the initiative to put down his face. What you said makes sense. Nangong Yuqing nodded. Let's forget about the past. I'll take my leave first. Even if Nangong Yuqing said that he didn't care, his cold demeanor showed that he didn't intend to bury the hatchet. Brother Nangong, wait. Seeing that Nangong Yuqing was about to leave, Han Bowen quickly stopped him. Chapter 58:13. Seeing that Nangong Yuqing didn't seem to want to talk to him, Han Bowen didn't mind and kept a gentle smile on his face. I think I heard you mention Di Beichen just now. Han Bowen asked tentatively. I heard that they died at the pavilion in the middle of the lake. Is that true? Nangong Yuqing looked at Han Bowen suspiciously. Is there a conflict between you and Di Beichen? There isn't much of a conflict, I'm just curious about this matter. If you don't want to tell me, then I don't need to tell you. Nangong Yuqing lazily withdrew his gaze. We still have to continue looking for opportunities, so we won't accompany you. Brother Nangong, why are you in such a hurry? Han Bowen sighed inwardly. Nangong Yuqing was also a shrewd person. If he didn't make things clear, then he definitely wouldn't tell him the truth. Thinking of this, he made a decision. Actually, when I was in the ancient battlefield, I saw Jiang Wenyan obtain a treasure. At that time, I was planning to snatch it, but I didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to suddenly appear and let them escape. Later, I heard that they had died, but I didn't believe it. Maybe they had encountered other opportunities. If I could see them again, I would also like to. Before he finished speaking, His meaning couldn't be more obvious. Nangong Yuqing didn't expect Han Bowen to be so clear about the matter, but he was very interested in the treasure. Do you know what kind of treasure Jiang Wenyan obtained? Han Bowen shook his head. I'm not too sure. At that time he was in a cave. It should have been left behind by a senior from the ancient battlefield. At that time, he immediately put it away, so we didn't even have a chance to see it. However, you've also been in the battlefield, so you should know how amazing the treasures of those seniors are. Their tyrannical auras aren't something we can touch, but Jiang Wenyan obtained one. I think it must be something amazing. Han Bowen guessed. Now can you tell me if you know anything about Bewitching? Nangong Yuqing hesitated for a moment before saying, They are indeed not dead. I just saw them. Han Bowen's eyes lit up, but he wasn't surprised. As expected, where are they now? Over there. Nangong Yuqing pointed ahead. Big brother. When Huang Fuchen saw Nangong Yuqing point out Bewitching's position, he couldn't help but look at Huang Fugang. After knowing that Bewitching and Huang Futing were extremely close, he had already treated Bewitching as one of his own. Naturally, he didn't want anything to happen to Bewitching. Huang Fugang only glanced at him indifferently, his expression cold and distant. You don't need to worry about this. But just as Huang Fuchun was about to explain himself, he saw Huang Fugang turn his head away. He didn't even seem to be interested in talking to him. Letting out a faint sigh in his heart, Huang Fuchen boy understood that his previous actions had completely angered his second brother, so he did not bother with him at all. It seemed that whatever he said was already useless. Thank you, brother Nangong. A smile appeared on Han Bowen's face. He cupped his hands and prepared to leave with his team. Chapter 58:14. Han Bowen paused and raised his eyebrows. Brother Nangong, why don't we go together? There aren't many treasures in the ancient battlefield, but each of them should be incredible. As long as we take them back, we'll split them equally. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's strength, he was worried. Just Bailey Hongzhuang was difficult enough to deal with, let alone Bewitching. Even though they hadn't been in the upper realms for long, they were all difficult to deal with. Nangong Yuqing turned to Huang Fugang. Brother Huangfu, what do you think? He had seen the strength of Bewitching and Bewitching. Even if his current cultivation was higher than theirs, after experiencing the immortal cloud secret territory, he was afraid of the strength of these two people. The darkness attribute taboo technique was terrifying. Even if their two teams worked together, they might not be able to deal with it. Didn't he want to teach Bewitching a lesson to regain the face he lost? However, he didn't dare to act rashly. When Han Bowen saw Nangong Yuqing's actions, he was surprised. The fewer people there were, the better. If there were too many people, there would be less to split. Of course, he didn't have any objections. The Huangfu family's strength was well known. Since he was here, they couldn't ignore him. That's right, brother Huangfu. This is a good opportunity. Huang Fuchen couldn't help but feel anxious. But before he could say anything, Huang Fugang had already refused. You guys go, I won't go. Huang Fugang said to Nangong Yuqing. Brother Nangong, we'll meet again if fate wills it. Hearing this, Nangong Yuqing felt that it was a pity, but he didn't try to persuade him. After what happened, Huang Fugang probably didn't want to face Huang Futing again. Sure enough, dealing with family matters was the most troublesome. Huang Fugang gave the order. Although the Huangfu family's cultivators were curious about this matter, they all left. Brother Nangong, are they difficult to deal with? Is that why you want to ask Huang Fugang for help? Han Bowen asked. Nangong Yuqing's expression darkened. He nodded and then shook his head. They are difficult to deal with, but it shouldn't be difficult for our two teams to deal with them. That's good. Han Bowen let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he had found a helper. Otherwise, the result would have been terrible. Even if you didn't come, I wanted to go back and take a look. I feel that they're in a strange place. What do you mean? Han Bowen calmed down and carefully listened to Nangong Yuqing's thoughts. After Nangong Yuqing explained the situation to Han Bowen understood what was going on. According to what you said, this matter is indeed a little strange. Let's go and take a look. The two of them hit it off immediately. If they were going alone, they would still be a little worried. However, with a companion, things would be different. By the way, did you see Jun Lingxuan and Xiao So along the way? Han Bowen shook his head. No, but the enmity between the Jun family and the Di family is deep. They disappeared together. Since Di Beichen and the others are still alive, I'm afraid that Jun Lingxuan and Xiao So are in danger. Chapter 58:15. Possession. Even someone as calm as Han Bowen couldn't help but raise his voice at this moment. This was too shocking. Could it be that he doesn't want to admit that he killed Jun Lingxuan? So he deliberately made up this reason? Impossible. Nangong Yuqing shook his head with certainty. I've dealt with them before. Although I don't like Di Beichen, I have to say that he's a straightforward person. If he really killed Jun Lingxuan, then he shouldn't deny it, let alone make up such an unacceptable reason. Seeing this, Han Bowen stared at Nangong Yuqing. He didn't know why Nangong Yuqing was so sure, but he was inclined to believe it. I understand. Han Bowen nodded slightly. He had already made up his mind. If he saw Jun Lingxuan in the future, it would be best to stay away from him. Otherwise, if he really was a peerless expert, who knew what the result would be? After Huang Futing's matter was resolved, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were in a very good mood. Among them, the most obvious was the group of darkness cultivators. Although this was Huang Futing's matter, they also seemed to have seen hope. If Huang Futing could bravely take this step, then so could they. Who didn't want to be with the person they liked? Hongzhuang, let's leave this place for now. Di Beichen saw that everyone had calmed down and said, we'll attract too much attention if we stay here. Nangong Yuqing is already suspicious. With his temperament, I don't think he'll let go of this opportunity. Maybe he's not far away, waiting to see what we do. Everyone looked at each other. Di Beichen's words were indeed reasonable. Nangong Yuqing had already asked this question before. That's right. Then let's leave first. It won't be too late to come back at night, Bai Lianche said. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Let's go. Everyone walked forward, but they didn't follow Huang Fugang's direction. They didn't want to run into him again. It would be best if they never ran into him again. After everyone had walked for a while, they suddenly saw a familiar figure on the way. However, when they saw this person, they did not find it strange at all. Only the person beside him caused their expressions to darken. Nangong Yuqing, did you come back because you missed us? Di Beichen looked at the surprised Nangong Yuqing with a mocking expression. This guy's suspicions were really heavy. According to Nangong Yuqing's thoughts, Di Beichen's group should have stayed there for a long time, but now they had left. Could it be that his judgment was wrong? Han Bowen also looked at Nangong Yuqing with a puzzled expression. Nangong Yuqing had made a solemn vow before, but now it seems that he wasn't. Han Bowen, we meet again. Jiang Wenyan's handsome face was filled with endless coldness. His ink-black eyes were filled with a cold seriousness. If Bailey Hongzhuang hadn't happened to appear, he wouldn't be in this world right now. Feeling the murderous intent in Jiang Wenyan's voice, Han Bowen's expression changed slightly. The corner of his mouth raised into a faint smile. Yes, what a coincidence. Originally, Di Beichen didn't know Han Bowen, but when he heard this name, his deep eyes were covered with a layer of darkness. When he saw Jiang Wenyan earlier, he had already mentioned this matter. Chapter 58:16. Nangong Yuqing, it seems you want to fight us to the end. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was cold, her voice full of disgust and provocation. When you left, I thought you had changed your temperament, but now it seems that it's really easy to change a leopard's spots. Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Nangong Yuqing's expression became somewhat awkward. In fact, if it weren't for Han Bowen's appearance, he really wouldn't have wanted to confront Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. According to his original plan, he wanted to hide and observe Di Beichen and the others. But now that Han Bowen appeared, the smoke of gunpowder suddenly filled the air. Looking at Nangong Yuqing's tangled appearance, Han Bowen was secretly surprised. He didn't expect Nangong Yuqing to be so afraid of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. It was really beyond his expectations. Jiang Wenyan, I'm sure you know why we're here, so there's no need to beat around the bush. Take out the thing, and this matter will be over. Ah, Di Beichen suddenly sneered, His long and narrow eyes narrowed dangerously, flashing a cold light that made people's hearts turn cold. Who gave you the courage to be so arrogant? His cold voice was filled with extreme arrogance, and his disdainful eyes were enough to intimidate everyone. Just his expressionless face alone was enough to give people endless pressure. Facing Bewitching, Han Bowen suddenly felt his hands and feet turn cold, and the fear that came from the bottom of his heart spread uncontrollably. His heart was frantically trembling. This was the first time he had come into contact with Bewitching, and the latter's aura was simply extraordinary. Qin Yin Sek's eldest senior brother, Qin Hongliang, seeing this, stood in front of Han Bowen. His aura, as steady as a mountain, made Han Bowen breathe a sigh of relief. Young Master D, this is the first time we've met. You really live up to your reputation. Qin Hongliang's expression was calm, as if he didn't feel the terrifying aura. Bewitching narrowed his eyes. Whether it was strength or mental strength, Qin Hongliang was obviously stronger than Han Bowen, but he wasn't affected in the slightest. He really did have some ability. Same here. Young Master D, we have no intention of being your enemy. Qin Hongliang's calm voice carried a calming power as he slowly said, as far as I know, this item was discovered by my junior brother and young Lord Jiang at the same time. It's normal for us to want to snatch it. I don't think it's possible for you to not interfere. But I also hope that you understand that we're all standing on our own side. I also hope that you won't take it to heart. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also looked at Qin Hongliang in surprise. This person's words were quite interesting. Judging from his words, today's battle was unavoidable, but he hoped that they wouldn't be enemies in the future. Bewitching quietly glanced at Qin Hongliang. The corners of his lips hooked up into a mischievous smile. Just when everyone thought that he would agree, his tone suddenly changed. You think what you said makes sense? Qin Hongliang was stunned. Han Bowen first wanted to kill my brother, then he attacked my wife. If it weren't for the fact that you're no match for my wife, you wouldn't have hesitated to make a move, right? Now, you're telling me that we'll be friends even if we meet? Your thinking is too simple. A cool breeze blew, and his white robe and black hair fluttered in the wind. That devilish face was even more captivating. Chapter 58:17. Looking at Bewitching, Nangong Yuqing and the others could only feel that even someone as powerful as him was being completely suppressed. Bailey Hongzhuang and Jiang Wenyan's eyes were overflowing with brilliance, and the corners of their mouths couldn't help but curl upwards. Murong Jing looked at the man in front of him, and even as a man, he couldn't help but sigh in admiration. He was really handsome. That's right. No matter who he was, if he dared to kill someone he cared about, then he wouldn't rest until he was dead. So what if he was crazy in the eyes of others? Ever since Bewitching came to the upper realm, he had always been a maverick existence. The eyes of Huang Futing and the other dark attribute cultivators were full of worship and reverence. That was their belief. The Dark Holy Sun was different from ordinary people. From the moment he made up his mind to establish the Dark Sacred Assembly, he had already subverted everyone's understanding, and yet he still went crazy for it. Qin Hongliang stared at Bewitching in a daze, and when he came back to his senses, his face had turned ashen. For a long time, he had always said this kind of thing. When had he ever met such an arrogant guy? Bewitching, aren't you overestimating yourself? Do you think you can do whatever you want just because you're the young master of the D family? Don't forget, if you don't have this identity, you are nothing at all. Qin Hongliang had already thrown his previous bearing to the side, and his roaring appearance didn't have the slightest bit of calmness and composure. If it wasn't for the D family and the Holy Daughter of the Light, no one would know who Bewitching was. Bewitching just looked at Qin Hongliang indifferently, and his voice was as gentle as water, like the sound of nature, but it made people unable to help but go crazy. Indeed, if I wasn't the young master of the D family, how could you be the eldest senior brother of the Blue Cloud sect? You. Qin Hongliang gritted his teeth, and only felt a stream of air rushing to the top of his head, and exploding with a loud bang. Blood rushed to his face, and even his ears turned the color of pig liver. Let's see what you're capable of. In the next moment, a long staff appeared in Qin Hongliang's hand. This long rod was completely red, and there was a golden protruding totem on top of it. It was as if a golden dragon was circling around it, and it was awe-inspiring and imposing. With a single glance, one could tell that this long staff was no ordinary item. Bang! With a stomp of the long staff, spiderweb-like cracks appeared on the ground with the place where it landed as the center. Seeing this, everyone's pupils constricted. The strength of this long rod was obvious. This Qin Hongliang is an extremely outstanding disciple of the Blue Cloud sect. It is said that he is the junior of an elder. Whether it is cultivation resources or weapons, he is much better than ordinary cultivators. I heard that this long staff was something he obtained from a ruin a few years ago, and the Blue Cloud sect gave it to him as a reward. Not only that, it is said that he has already broken through to the Radiant Moon realm. Beichen, you must be careful. Morong Jing approached Di Beichen and introduced him in a low voice. Di Beichen's eyes turned slightly. From the moment Qin Hongliang appeared, he knew that his strength was not ordinary. Up until now, there were very few cultivators who had broken through to the Radiant Moon realm among the various forces. Since Qin Hongliang was able to break through, his strength was naturally not weak. Do you dare to fight one-on-one with me? Qin Hongliang waved his long staff, and even the air was filled with a sonic boom. The long staff was pointed directly at Di Beichen, and his ink-black eyes were as cold as knives, and his murderous aura was threatening. Chapter 58:18. Han Bowen had wanted to ally with the Nangong family to deal with Di Beichen and the others, but he had never expected that the situation would suddenly turn into a conflict between the two of them. Do you think I'm inferior to him? Qin Hongliang glanced at Han Bowen indifferently. The coldness and indifference in his eyes shocked Han Bowen. He immediately shook his head and did not dare to persuade him anymore. However, Qin Hongliang seemed to have been provoked by his words. His voice became even more resolute and unyielding. I won't stop until one of us dies. Do you dare? Di Beichen looked at the face in front of him that was flushed red with anger. His black eyes were like deep pools that contained a sharp and intimidating light. The corners of his lips curled up slightly, bringing with them an extreme danger and charm. Looking at Di Beichen like this, the women present could not help but exclaim in their hearts, "Evildoer." He was a living evildoer. However, that extreme overbearingness and wildness of his made people fall deep into it, and unable to extricate themselves. I'll accompany you to the end. The cold words were filled with an endless domineering aura. The cold and arrogant aura emitted from his body made people shudder. Qin Hongliang, who was originally furious, felt an inexplicable sense of guilt at this moment. However, he forced himself to maintain the angry expression on his face, unwilling to let others see the fear in his heart. In the next moment, Di Beichen stepped forward. His incomparably handsome face was cold and indifferent. The silver-sharp sword reflected an eerie cold light under the sunlight. His white robe fluttered without any wind, and his black hair brushed past his face. He was like a god descending to the mortal world. Make your move. The corners of his lips curled up dangerously. His extremely pleasant voice was filled with murderous intent. Ah! Qin Hongliang roared. He, who had long since been unable to withstand such an aura, charged forward crazily. The red long rod in his hand was vigorous and powerful. The air seemed to be stirred by the long rod. His cultivation of the Radiant Moon realm was completely exposed as he attacked Di Beichen with frightening momentum. Di Beichen's figure flashed like a ghost. In the blink of an eye, he quietly landed behind Qin Hongliang. After Qin Hongliang saw Di Beichen's figure disappear, he quickly locked onto the aura behind him. As the eldest senior of the Blue Cloud sect, his combat experience was also extremely rich. With a backflip, he waved his long staff and blocked Di Beichen's sharp sword. Ding! The blade of the sword collided with the long staff, and sparks flew everywhere. After sensing Di Beichen's cultivation, Qin Hongliang's heart was also at ease. Nebula Stage 9. Even if Di Beichen was really an outstanding existence in the same realm, it was impossible for Di Beichen to be his opponent in the gap between the two realms. If he killed Di Beichen, he would be famous from now on. After sensing the gap between the two's cultivation, Huang Futing and the others could not help but worry. He turned his head to ask Bailey Hongzhuang, but he saw a faint and elegant smile on the latter's beautiful face. That was the gentle gaze of someone looking at the person they loved, and it was also filled with deep trust. Seeing this, Huang Futing was even more confused. Miss Bailey, there is a gap between the young master and Qin Hongliang's cultivation. Aren't you worried at all? Worried about what? Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly. Her clear black and white eyes were filled with confidence. Don't worry, Beichen will be fine. Before fighting with a cultivator of the Radiant Moon Realm, she would be worried about this problem. However, even when facing Qing Devil, Di Beichen could hurt him. This proved the true power of his killer move. Chapter 58-19. Although Huang Futing was doubtful, he believed in Bailey Hongzhuang. Since she said so, there was no need for him to worry. After the crowd put down their worries, they were no longer as nervous as before. Instead, they carefully observed the battle between the two. Clang! 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 The sword and the staff kept colliding. The attack range of the staff was larger than that of the sword. In order to injure Qin Hongliang, Di Beichen had to close the distance between them. During this process, the crowd also witnessed how terrifying his ghostly figure was. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared without a trace. They could only rely on their aura to lock onto him. If they were even a little slower, they would be seriously injured. However, Qin Hongliang's title as the eldest senior brother of the Blue Cloud sect was not for nothing. He had rich battle experience and was very powerful. For a moment, the two sides were neck and neck. In the eyes of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, this was the scene. But in the eyes of Nangong Yuqing and the others, it was a completely different scene. Qin Hongliang was in the Radiant Moon Realm. Although they knew that he had not used his killing move, the fact that they were tied showed that there was a problem. Nangong Yuqing secretly judged in his heart. If the person fighting Di Beichen at this moment was him, would his performance be better than Qin Hongliang's? The more Qin Hongliang fought, the more frightened he became. He thought that this would be an easy fight, but now it seemed that was not the case at all. Di Beichen's movement technique was exquisite. Although there was a gap of one realm between them, his strength was not weaker than Nangong Yuqing's. As a result, Nangong Yuqing did not have any advantage. Wood binding technique, Qin Hongliang shouted coldly, and the power of the wood element burst out. Then, to everyone's amazement, they saw a piece of wood suddenly appear, densely intertwined together like a snake. In the blink of an eye, it formed a huge cage, trapping Di Beichen in it. This is the technique of a wood element cultivator. Bai Li Yanche's eyes narrowed, and a trace of shock and worry appeared on his handsome face. After the awakening of an elemental talent, the cultivators of each element would master the offensive techniques of their respective elements. However, it wasn't easy to grasp these methods. Not only did it require the methods of their respective powers, it also required their own comprehension ability. Obviously, this was their first time coming into contact with the wood binding technique. These vines seemed to have a life of their own, as they continued to compress Di Beichen, as if they were trying to strangle him to death. Qin Hongliang controlled the wooden strips with both hands. He had only started cultivating the wood binding technique after breaking through to the Radiant Moon Realm. This wood binding technique seemed easy, yet it was extremely difficult to cultivate. It required one to have sufficient understanding of the wood attribute and be able to communicate with the wood attribute in the heavens and the earth before controlling and transforming it into one's own strength. He had spent a lot of effort to cultivate the wood binding technique and had failed many times before it began to take shape. He believed that it was impossible for Di Beichen to master such a method, since he had yet to break through to the Radiant Moon tier. Di Beichen waved the sword in his hand, and in the blink of an eye, he had stabbed more than 100 times. But for some reason, these vines were extremely sturdy, and even the sharp sword could not pierce through them. Seeing that the gap in the cage was getting smaller and smaller, he knew that if he couldn't escape, he would really die here. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes narrowed. This was the first time she had seen such a method, and it was definitely not easy to break through. She wanted to help, but the auras of Nangong Yuqing and the others had already locked onto them. Chapter 58:20. Damn it! I didn't expect Qin Hongliang to be able to learn this move. Morong Jing cursed. His usually gentle face was now full of anger. This kind of move was almost unbreakable for cultivators below the Radiant Moon realm. After Bewitching discovered that his sword couldn't cut through the rattan, he knew that the rattan was filled with what attribute energy, and was far more resilient than normal. In this forest, what attribute energy was the most abundant, so it was too difficult to use other methods to break it. The corners of Qin Hongliang's mouth gradually rose. Since the beginning of the fight, he had been secretly afraid that he would be defeated by Bewitching if he wasn't careful. In desperation, he could only use his killing move. In fact, he hadn't mastered this move for long, and it wasn't 100% successful. Fortunately, he was lucky this time and successfully used it. As long as Bewitching couldn't break this move, he would win. Han Bowen and the others smiled happily when they saw this scene. It seemed that the situation wasn't as bad as they thought. No matter how strong Bewitching was, he was still limited by his level. Nangong Yuqing couldn't help but secretly rejoice. He had always been afraid of Bewitching's strong rise, but he didn't dare to act rashly, because he worried that he might not be a match for Bewitching. Now that Qin Hongliang had helped him solve this big problem, he didn't have to worry about it anymore. It was easy to imagine how happy he was. Bewitching, you're too arrogant. Qin Hongliang looked coldly at Bewitching, and his calm voice was full of ridicule. How arrogant was Bewitching before? Wasn't he still trapped in the rattan, and unable to move? If you admit your mistake and beg for mercy, I might consider letting you live. Qin Hongliang couldn't hide his pride. Of course, even if Bewitching begged for mercy, he wouldn't let him go. However, only by humiliating him before he died would he be able to vent his anger even more thoroughly. However, just when Qin Hongliang was feeling extremely complacent, a dazzling sword chi suddenly appeared from the vine cage. It was an extremely sharp sword energy that seemed to be able to cut through everything in the world. It was invincible and invincible. You think too much. The magnetic and pleasant voice carried with it an icy chill. Everyone only heard a crisp sound before the seemingly indestructible cage was completely shattered. A cool breeze blew and his robes fluttered. That godlike handsome figure once again appeared before everyone's eyes. His incomparably handsome face held a playful smile, with a hint of wickedness and arrogance, but it was so pleasing to the eye. The one who should be begging for mercy is you. Looking at Bewitching, who had escaped, Qin Hongliang's eyes were filled with shock. For a moment, he couldn't come back to his senses. How is this possible? His eyes were lifeless, as if he had received a huge blow. His mind was completely blank. His master had clearly told him that this move could be considered his ultimate move. It was impossible for cultivators below the Radiant Moon realm to break through this move, but Bewitching had broken through it. How was this possible? Han Bowen and Nangong Yuqing's eyes widened, and their hearts were in a perilous situation. Soon, Nangong Yuqing's expression returned to normal. It seemed that he had been right all along. Bewitching was an existence that defied common sense. Chapter 58:21. Even though this was the second time they had seen Bewitching use this move, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were still amazed. They were keenly aware that the second time Bewitching used it, he was obviously more proficient than the first time, and his speed was also faster. In fact, they had practiced this move at the same time as Bewitching, but they had never used it before. Even though they had practiced it for a long time, there was still a gap in the strength of the sword chi. Bewitching did not give Qin Hongliang time to think. He stabbed out with his sword again, and a dazzling sword light quietly appeared. This time, everyone was closer, so they could feel it more clearly. Nangong Yuqing only felt that the sharp sword chi seemed to be able to pierce through everything. This was almost beyond his understanding. It was even more terrifying than the strongest martial skill he had ever seen. He could not believe that Bewitching possessed such a martial skill. Even the Nangong family did not possess such a level of martial skill. A dazzling light flashed, and Bewitching turned around indifferently and walked back to Bailey Hongzhuang's side. Everyone looked at Qin Hongliang, who was still standing in the same place, with some doubts in their hearts. Wasn't this supposed to be a fight to the death? Why did it suddenly end? Eldest senior brother? Han Bowen called out softly, only to find that Qin Hongliang was still standing in the same place with the same expression as before, completely ignoring him. Seeing this, Han Bowen frowned slightly, not understanding what was going on. However, when he reached out to touch Qin Hongliang's head rolled to the ground, and his face spun a few times before coming to a stop. No one had expected such a situation, and for a moment, the Blue Cloud sex cultivators' faces were filled with horror. Eldest senior brother, everyone wailed, and when they looked at Bewitching again, there was a trace of fear in their eyes besides hatred. In their eyes, the strength of their eldest senior brother was already an extremely powerful existence. But Bewitching had not yet broken through to the Radiant Moon realm, yet he was able to kill their eldest senior brother. If he broke through to the Radiant Moon realm, that scene, they did not dare to think about it. Looking at the sorrowful faces of the Blue Cloud sex cultivators, Bewitching did not care. It was Qin Hongliang who had proposed the deathmatch, and the result was also his own choice. Bewitching, you actually killed our eldest senior brother. Han Bowen pointed his finger at Bewitching. His blood rushed to his head, and his face was filled with anger. Bewitching only glanced at his hand, and Han Bowen could not help but be startled. He sheepishly withdrew his hand. So what? Han Bowen was stunned and continued. Our Azure Cloud sect will not let you off. So you're saying that you're forcing us to kill all of you? Bailey Hongzhuang, who was standing next to Bewitching, suddenly spoke. Looking at the married couple's appearance, Han Bowen and the others were so angry that they were speechless. How could you speak like that? These two people were really a match made in heaven, where you kill and I sharpen my blade. Murong Jing and the others' eyes were cold, and it was obvious that they were ready to attack. As long as Han Bowen and the others dared to make any movements, they would definitely attack without hesitation. Seeing this, the Blue Cloud sex cultivators could only swallow their frustration. They were more worried that if Bewitching and the others had the intention to kill, all of them might have to die here. Chapter 58:22. If he had known that they were such a useless bunch, he would not have chosen to come here with them. He suddenly admired Huang Fugang. Perhaps he had already guessed that this would happen, so he left first. With such pig-like teammates, it was better to act on his own. Although Qin Hongliang's cultivation was good, his brain was not good. The situation should not have reached this point, but he had courted death by proposing a battle to the death. He deserved to end up like this. This guy must have not heard of Bewitching's deeds, so he was overconfident. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret, so he could only regret it in hell. Nangong Yuqing, it seems that your vision is not very good. Bai Li Yinche looked at Nangong Yuqing mockingly. Do you want to try fighting with us? I heard that you have also broken through to the Radiant Moon stage. Hearing this, everyone's eyes were fixed on Nangong Yuqing. The cultivators of the Nangong family tensed up in an instant. Once they started fighting, a great battle would break out between the two forces. Han Bowen looked at Nangong Yuqing expectantly. If Nangong Yuqing wanted to fight with them, they would accompany him to the end. However, Nangong Yuqing ignored Han Bowen and said with a faint smile, You think too much. I just dropped something and came back to look for it. It seems that I can't find it, so let's leave. What a joke. Bewitching's move just now. Even he didn't have the confidence to avoid it. He did not want to lose his life here. Moreover, Qin Hongliang had nothing to do with him, so why should he take the risk for him? Han Bowen did not expect Nangong Yuqing to be so cowardly. He did not even dare to fight, so what should they do? From the beginning to the end, Bewitching only looked at Nangong Yuqing indifferently. He did not intend to pay attention to this guy, but sooner or later, he would become a stumbling block because of his appearance. When the time was right, he would completely eliminate this trouble. Since he did not understand the situation, there was no need to keep him alive. Nangong Yuqing smiled and cupped his fists. Just as he was about to leave, the sound of dense footsteps came from not far away. Just based on this sound, Everyone was sure that this was a very large group, perhaps even more than the number of people here. Soon, a group of people appeared in everyone's sight. At first glance, Bewitching noticed Chen Feng from the Great Devil sect. However, apart from Chen Feng, he also saw Chu Yingming and several other powers. Chen Feng, we meet again. A warm smile appeared on Bewitching's face. It was less cold and more amiable. Chen Feng was pleasantly surprised to see Bewitching. Beichen, you are still alive. This is great. Now, I'm afraid that everyone in the ancient battlefield thinks that we have died. Bewitching chuckled. Almost everyone, when they saw them, would say this in the first sentence. Chen Feng shrugged helplessly. The incident at the pavilion in the middle of the lake has spread far and wide. In a short period of time, everyone knows about it. I think only a small number of people don't know about it. Why are there so many of you here? Chapter 58:23. When Chu Yingming and the rest saw that Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest were all standing there safely, they couldn't help but sigh inwardly. They were truly lucky. From the looks of it, the whirlpool that suddenly appeared at the bottom of the lake might have been there to save their lives. After all, under such circumstances, it would have been too difficult for Bewitching's group to return to the shore alive. If they hadn't been sucked into the lake, perhaps they would have already died. Perhaps they might even have obtained some incredible fortuitous encounter at the bottom of the lake. Actually, we encountered it not too long ago. A few days ago, we noticed that something strange was happening in this area. In the evening, the fiery clouds would change into a unique shape and appear in this area every time. At first, we didn't pay much attention to it. However, after noticing that this was happening frequently, we decided to come and take a look. Along the way, we met other groups. After finding out that everyone had the same goal, we decided to travel together. With a smile on his face, Chen Feng explained the situation without any hesitation. The cultivators from the various sects did not expect Chen Feng to be so frank. Although they had already noticed this problem, there were even more groups that hadn't noticed it. Since everyone was paying more attention to their surroundings, very few people noticed the abnormality in the sky. Chen Feng explained the situation in detail without hiding anything. It could be seen that the rumors were true. Chen Feng was very close to the young master of the D family. Hearing this, Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang looked at each other helplessly. In fact, during the past few days, since they had nothing to do during the day, they had also noticed the sky. It seemed like the secret of the blood spirit stone couldn't be kept. Bailey Hongzhuang shook his head without leaving a trace. Since things had already turned out this way, there was no need to hide it anymore. After seeing the groups from the Huangfu family, Nangong family, and Qingyun sect today, everyone had a premonition in their hearts. Previously, they had walked for so many days without encountering a single group. However, in one day, they had encountered so many groups. It could be seen that this was fate. After Chen Feng finished explaining his purpose for coming here, he turned his gaze to the corpse on the ground not far away. It was Qin Hongliang, the eldest disciple of the Qingyun sect. As a member of the sect, he had some contact with Qin Hongliang. He didn't expect this guy to be dead. His gaze swept past Nangong Yuqing and Han Bowen, before finally landing on Bewitching and the others. He didn't even need to think to know that Qin Hongliang had died at their hands. When Han Bowen saw so many teams, he was overjoyed. Even the heavens were helping him. Originally, when he saw Nangong Yuqing's indifferent attitude, he was worried about what they should do. Once Bewitching and the others attacked them, they would have the advantage in both numbers and strength. As a result, they would be in great danger. However, now that so many teams had come, the most important thing was that Xiaoyao Palace had a very good relationship with them. With a helper, their chances of escaping unscathed would be much higher. Han Bowen, what happened? How could Hong Liang? Gu Wenchang of Xiaoyao Palace walked to Han Bowen's side, his face filled with shock. Chapter 58:24. Following Han Bowen's words, everyone's gaze turned towards Bewitching. They never thought that Bewitching would have a conflict with the Qingyun sect. Han Bowen, please get this straight. The person who proposed the battle was your eldest senior brother. Later on, the person who changed his mind and proposed a battle to the death was also your eldest senior brother. Now that things have turned out this way, are you blaming us? Bai Lianche's gaze was cold. He was also amazed by Han Bowen's ability to distort the truth. As long as it was a battle to the death, there was no need to say anything more. Winning was due to one's ability, and losing was due to one's lack of strength. Sure enough, after hearing this explanation, the crowd no longer had any thoughts of asking further. Although they did not know why Qin Hongliang would provoke Bewitching for no reason, since he was the one who proposed the battle to the death and had fallen, he could only blame himself for making the wrong judgment. Han Bowen glared at Bai Lianche with resentment. Initially, he had only wanted to deal with Jiang Wenyan. However, this group of people had dragged them into this, and even forced them into this situation. No matter what, he could not let Bewitching and the others escape unscathed today. A sinister idea formed in Han Bowen's mind. He wanted to pull everyone to his side. Bewitching and the others have a treasure in their hands. Han Bowen shouted loudly. Previously, Jiang Wenyan and I had discovered a treasure together. However, they had taken it away. My eldest senior brother had wanted to take it back, but ended up in this situation. The crowd was not interested in the grudge between the Qing Yun sect and the Di family. However, after hearing the word treasure, everyone's eyes brightened. Up until now, everyone's gains in the ancient battlefield were pitifully small. However, everyone understood that the gains from this place must be something extraordinary. Originally, everyone had suspected that Bewitching and the others had obtained a considerable gain from the bottom of the lake. However, no one had said anything. Naturally, they did not take the initiative to mention this. Now that Han Bowen had pointed out this point, everyone's thoughts became lively. Chen Feng noticed the sinister look in Han Bowen's eyes, and his face sank. Ownerless items have always belonged to whoever obtains them. It's your fault for not being able to obtain them, due to your lack of strength. However, now you intend to borrow everyone's hands to help you take revenge. Aren't you too despicable? Chen Feng's protection caught everyone off guard. As such, everyone was dumbstruck. In the past, he had never seen Chen Feng protecting others. Chen Feng had always thought highly of himself and ignored others. However, his cultivation made everyone have no choice but to take him seriously. Among the cultivators who entered the ancient battlefield, there were very few cultivators who had broken through to the Radiant Moon realm. However, this Chen Feng was truly too freakish. Not only had he broken through to the Radiant Moon realm, he had even reached the second stage of the Radiant Moon realm. Among them, none of them were Chen Feng's match. Ever since this guy had made a name for himself, his strength had been crushing everyone. No matter how hard everyone tried to catch up, this guy was still firmly ahead of them. Han Bowen blanked for a moment before his eyes flickered. Even though he was being ignored, he still said unyieldingly, Chen Feng, aren't you usually quite arrogant? Now, you are actually so protective of them. Do you really think that they will share this treasure with you? Stop dreaming. That's right. Gu Wenchang agreed. He was also interested in this treasure. However, their strength alone was not enough. As such, he had to help Han Bowen convince the others. Chapter 58-25. Even if they had the advantage in numbers, if Chen Feng decided to help Bewitching, they would still have to think twice. After all, this competition did not depend on numbers. As long as Chen Feng, Bewitching, and the others could suppress the leader, the result would be set. Chen Feng, we came here together. Why don't you ask Bewitching to show us the treasure? Gu Wenchang said. Or you can see if he is willing to show it to you. Don't be a fool. Everyone's gaze landed on Chen Feng and Bewitching. This was a test of the trust between them. However, Chen Feng ignored Gu Wenchang's words. His expression was indifferent, but his voice was firm. Gu Wenchang, I don't care about these things. He is my brother. What's mine is his. Do you think I would covet these things? Ah. Chen Feng sneered disdainfully. His attitude was clear. Not only Chen Feng, but the cultivators of the Great Devil sect were also unmoved. After coming out of the Immortal Cloud secret domain, They had a good impression of Bewitching and the others. There were a lot of treasures in this world. But it was impossible to rob someone just because they knew they had a treasure. Seeing that his attempt to sow discord was useless, Gu Wenchang's expression became unsightly. Although this kind of thing happened from time to time, it had never failed. He did not expect to be defeated this time. After seeing that there was no hope, everyone turned their gaze to Nangong Yuqing and Chu Yingming. Everyone was silent, but the atmosphere was somewhat strange. Bewitching and the others knew that these people were plotting against each other. They were comparing the strength of both sides to see what their chances of victory were. As long as they were sure that their chances of victory were higher, they would definitely make their move. Chu Yingming noticed that everyone was looking at him. He looked at them indifferently and said, "Treasures belong to whoever obtains them. It is only natural." Ever since Bailey Hongzhuang healed his injuries, he had put away his original hatred. If she hadn't saved him, he would be dead by now. It was obvious that the D family was on the rise. Coupled with Bailey Hongzhuang's identity as the Saint of the Light, they needed to think twice before making an enemy out of them. Back then, his father had spent so much effort to resolve the grudge between them. He would not stir up this conflict again. Chu Yingming's reaction was clearly outside of everyone's expectations. But like this, everyone had no chance of winning. Han Bowen and Gu Wenchang looked at each other. No one had thought of this situation, but they couldn't think of any other way if they couldn't resolve it at this point. You bunch of idiots. Even at a time like this, you still pretend to be sincere. If he really treated you as friends, he wouldn't have been so secretive and not said anything. Han Bowen couldn't hold back the anger in his heart and sneered. Bewitching looked at Han Bowen indifferently. Suddenly, the corner of his mouth rose into a devilish smile. "I know that everyone wants to see what we obtained. I can show it to everyone. I can even share it with everyone." Chapter 58-26. It was obvious that everyone was at their wits' end, but Bewitching was willing to share it with everyone? Could it be that he was provoked by Han Bowen and decided to do something so outrageous? Han Bowen was also stunned. For a moment, he wondered if he had heard wrongly. Although he had said so, he knew that no one else would do such a thing. However, Bewitching actually had such a plan? Nangong Yuqing was also stunned. He didn't understand what Bewitching was thinking. If he had said so earlier, then things wouldn't have become so troublesome. However, Bewitching's next words made Han Bowen and the others' faces turn ugly. In just a short moment, their faces turned red, and even their ears turned the color of pig liver. Their expressions were as disgusting as if they had eaten a fly. "I'm willing to share it with everyone, but I have a request. They can't see it." Bewitching used his hand to divide the area into the Nangong family, Blue Cloud sect, and Xiaoyao Palace. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled up slightly, and her jet-black eyes couldn't help but smile. Bewitching wanted to anger Han Bowen and the others to death. "As long as we deal with them, I'll take it out. How about it?" Bewitching raised his eyebrows, and his eyes were full of ridicule. Since Han Bowen wanted to make a fuss about it, then he would make Han Bowen speechless. However, on another point he had to thank Han Bowen. After this incident, his view of the Chu family had changed. Although the grudges between them had been resolved, there were too many situations in this world where people didn't get along. Chu Yingming didn't want to make a move in such a situation, which was enough to show that he had changed his mind. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also looked at Chu Yingming differently. Turning hostility into friendship wasn't a bad choice. "No problem. We also have a problem. Leave it to us." A few groups responded one after another. If it was said that the difficulty of robbing them was too great before, now that Bewitching was willing to share, the groups they had to deal with were the Blue Cloud sect, Nangong clan, and Xiaoyao Palace. Between the two teams, this request was undoubtedly much simpler. "I don't have a problem with that either." Chu Yingming lightly smiled. He wanted to give him a taste of his own medicine. However, Bewitching's move was even more ruthless. Han Bowen was really dumbfounded at this moment. He didn't expect Bewitching to be so abnormal that he actually came up with such a method. Feeling the dangerous gazes of the crowd on him, his heart could not help but tighten. He could not stop his footsteps from retreating, only wanting to escape as soon as possible. Nangong Yuqing was completely dumbfounded. He regretted it to death. Why did he follow the people of the Blue Cloud sect here? After coming here, not only did he reap all the benefits, but it also deepened the conflict between the two sides. Most importantly, he still had to face the pursuit of everyone. Wasn't this just shooting himself in the foot? He couldn't help but envy Chu Ming. This guy was truly amazing. He was even able to endure the situation earlier. If he could endure it as well, this wouldn't have happened. Go! Chen Feng shouted coldly. Almost immediately, everyone charged toward Han Bowen's group. Noticing this, Gu Wenchang's group did not dare to hesitate and quickly retreated. Chapter 58-27. Damn it! This Bewitching is simply a madman. Nangong Yuqing cursed. His intestines were green with regret. After knowing Bewitching's temperament, he should not have chosen to provoke him at such a time. Although Bewitching had only been in the upper realm for a few years, Nangong Yuqing knew from the time in the Immortal Cloud secret domain that Bewitching would always do something amazing. The decision he made now was quite exaggerated. However, when he thought about it carefully, it was quite in line with his style. The cultivators from the Nangong family, the Azure Cloud sect, and the Xiaoyao Palace all spread their legs and quickly ran in all directions. At such a time, it was a competition of speed. If they fell behind, the result would be obvious. Gu Wenchang was no less depressed than Nangong Yuqing. He had never dealt with Bewitching before. How could he have known that this person would do something so outrageous? He was inexplicably implicated by the Blue Cloud sect. One could imagine how depressed he was. He also wanted to know what kind of treasure Bewitching had obtained. However, he had no hope of obtaining it now, and was even being chased by everyone. The moment Bewitching saw Han Bowen running away, his figure flashed, and the sword in his hand flashed. It was an extremely thin sword light. It was hidden in the sunlight, and was not obvious. However, the sharp feeling it gave off was something that could not be ignored. Han Bowen, who was running away, felt an extremely sharp aura approaching him. His scalp felt like it was going to explode under this sharp sword aura. He could not help but turn his head and look behind him. He saw the extremely thin sword aura approaching him at lightning speed, as if it was chasing after his soul. A dazzling light dazzled his eyes, startling him, and causing him to stop running. Bang! Han Bowen's body crashed to the ground. A bloody hole appeared between his eyebrows. Evidently, he was no longer breathing. Chen Feng looked at Bewitching's move in astonishment. Even though he was far away, he could still feel how terrifying that sword aura was. Even with his cultivation, he had to be careful when facing this sword aura. It seemed that Bewitching's improvement was also very shocking. No wonder Qin Hongliang died in your hands. Your strength has indeed improved, Chen Feng said with a smile. However, do you want to take advantage of this opportunity to leave? It was such a pity that he had to share the treasures that he had obtained with great difficulty. Taking advantage of the fact that almost everyone was chasing after Nangong Yuqing and the others, it was a good choice to leave. Hearing this, Bewitching smiled and shook his head. No need. Actually, what we got this time is just a map. It's not a powerful treasure. Chen Feng understood. So that's the case. Is this a map of the primordial battlefield? Originally, he was still thinking about what kind of precious skill it was to share with everyone. Now that he understood, he completely understood that a map was indeed worthy of being shared with everyone. That's right. This is the map of this place. Right now, almost everyone doesn't understand the situation of the ancient battlefield. A map is actually very useful. Chen Feng smiled. It was similar to how he had wandered around the ancient battlefield for so long, without knowing where he was. Alright. Along the way, did you see my elder brother? Bewitching asked. Yinju as well. We still haven't met up with them. Chapter 58-28. Who is he with? Bewitching's eyes lit up. Along the way, he had not heard any news about his elder brother. He could not help but worry. I heard someone mention it sporadically. Chen Feng turned his head and looked behind him. A cultivator immediately said, I heard that young Master D is with the Bailey family. Oh, Bailey Hongzhuang's voice had a trace of surprise. In fact, she also wanted to meet up with the Bailey family as soon as possible. No matter what, she was the head of the Bailey family. Although she was from 1,000 years ago, she was still inseparable from the Bailey family. That was his responsibility. However, along the way, she had not met any cultivators from the Bailey family. She felt somewhat helpless. Elder brother is with them. You don't have to worry. Bewitching naturally knew what Bailey Hongzhuang was thinking. He believed that as long as everyone met up, the possibility of danger in this ancient battlefield was relatively small. Moreover, elder brother was smart. With him leading the team, there would be no problem. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly with a smile. She believed in Di Xiaofeng's strength. No news about Yunju? By now most of them had met up. Even if they had not met up with Lin Taxing and the others, they knew that they were together when they were at the pavilion in the middle of the lake. There was no need to worry. Mo Yunjue was the only one they had yet to meet. Chen Feng frowned and looked at the people behind him. Have you heard any news about young Master Mo? Their team had also gradually met up during the journey. Therefore, he was not very clear about some news. Everyone shook their heads. We have not met him, nor have we heard any news about him. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had a slightly complicated expression. They had been moving together all along. Why did most of them already have news about Mo Yunjue except for now? Could it be that when he entered the ancient battlefield, he was teleported to a very remote location? Bewitching noticed the worry in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes and comforted her softly. Don't worry. He will be fine. They were very clear about Mo Yunjue's strength. Even among the many outstanding geniuses, he was still an extremely outstanding existence. In addition, Mo Yunjue also cultivated this sword art. As long as he did not encounter any great danger, he would be able to escape unscathed. By the way, since you have returned safely, how is the situation with Jun Lingxuan and the other two? Did they directly solve this problem? Chen Feng asked straightforwardly. Now that their relationship was extremely close, he understood the thoughts of Di Beichun and the others quite well. There was no need to hide it. Jun Lingxuan and Xiao Souo were definitely two stumbling blocks. If he could get rid of them in the ancient battlefield, it would undoubtedly be great. Hearing this, Di Beichun shook his head slightly. The situation is somewhat beyond our expectations. They ran away. Chen Feng frowned. Logically speaking, with the strength of Di Beichun and the others, they should not have a chance to escape. However, if they missed this opportunity, it would be much more troublesome to find another one. That's not the case. The one who ran away was not him but us. Jiang Wenyin sighed with emotion. Now that he thought about it, he could not help but feel apprehensive. Chapter 58-29. Looking at Chen Feng's incredulous expression, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but laugh. Chen Feng, who had always been calm, rarely showed such an expression. What are you laughing at? Chen Feng looked at them doubtfully. They should be extremely nervous after such a thing happened, yet they could still laugh. Jun Lingxuan is dead. Dead? Chen Feng frowned. Were you deliberately making fun of me just now? To be precise, his soul is gone, but his body is still alive. Chen Feng was slightly stunned. Then his eyes suddenly widened, and his face was filled with horror. Jun Lingxuan was actually possessed? The situation was actually so thrilling after you entered the lake? We were lucky that we were able to escape. Jiang Wenyin spread his hands. Even though so many days had passed, he still felt an indescribable palpitation when he thought about it. So, the current Jun Lingxuan is no longer the previous Jun Lingxuan? Chen Feng was somewhat stunned. Originally, Jun Lingxuan's death was a good thing. However, with the current situation, things seem to have become more complicated. Then what do you plan to do? If we can kill him, we will kill him, Di Beichun said indifferently. The cultivators of the Great Devil sect were also shocked by this news. Who would have thought that the dignified young master of the Jun family would end up like this? Have you heard any news about Jun Lingxuan along the way? Linga asked. Chen Feng shook his head slightly. Everyone only knows that Jun Lingxuan disappeared with you. Before I saw you, I didn't even hear any news about you. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned slightly. Logically speaking, Jun Lingxuan would not have disappeared after appearing. However, it was strange that there was no news after so long. Qing Devil himself came from the ancient battlefield. Do you think that he has some base in the ancient battlefield? Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows. This seemed to be a possibility. It's possible. Di Beichen nodded. However, we don't know where his base is. Perhaps he has just succeeded in possessing someone, and needs time to adapt to his new body. Just as everyone was talking, Chu Yingming and the others returned. Feeling everyone's attention, Chu Yingming said, Nangong Yuqing ran away. Except for some people who ran faster, everyone else stayed behind. Everyone was not surprised by this result. Nangong Yuqing's cultivation was outstanding among the cultivators here, so it was not easy to kill him. In fact, they did not intend to start a massacre. They just wanted to teach the other party a lesson, and let him know that they were not to be trifled with. Moreover, the Nangong family, the Nangong Yuqings, the situation would be worse. After Yuqing, Chen. Everyone stood still, and for a moment, no one was the first to speak. What we obtained earlier wasn't anything special, Lin Feng said with a smile. Di Bei Chen's voice gradually grew louder, but when these words fell into everyone's ears, it was not just ordinary depression. They had spent so much effort. Could it be that Di Beichen was fooling them? What we obtained before was a map of the ancient battlefield. It was because of this that we were able to share it with everyone. Chapter 58:30. So that's how it is. The map is also very good. It's better to know the environment than to wander around like a headless fly. Bailey Hongzhuang took out the map. Of course, this was not the original map, but a map drawn later on. The mountains and rivers on the map were all the same. The only difference was that there were no markings. After knowing that the secret of this place could not be kept, Bailey Hongzhuang redrew the Lake Midlake Pavilion and the Blood Spirit Stone. As for the other places, she directly ignored them. Those were the places they were going to explore. It could be said that they had grasped a great opportunity. How could she just tell everyone? Everyone was originally full of doubts about the map. However, when they looked at the environment on the map and connected it to the places they had been to before, they realized that it was a real map. It really is a map of the ancient battlefield. I came from here before. That's right, I came from here. Almost everyone found the place they had come from. Originally, they did not understand how big the places they had been to were in the ancient battlefield. At this moment, everyone finally had an intuitive understanding. No one suspected that the map was fake, because none of the people who had come to the ancient battlefield with them could draw it. The only explanation was that this map came from the ancient battlefield. Look, this is the location of the Lake Midlake Pavilion, right? A man pointed at the Lake Midlake Pavilion on the map, and his eyes lit up. Almost everyone noticed the location of the symbol. The Lake Midlake Pavilion's inheritance had already been obtained, and it had nothing to do with them. However, when they noticed the red stones that were drawn on the area, they could not help but look excited. The red stone seems to be pointing to this place. Chu Yingming raised his head and looked at Di Beichen and the others. He could not help but wonder if the inheritance in this red place had already fallen into the hands of Di Beichen and the others. After a short moment of excitement, everyone thought of this. If the inheritance had already fallen into the hands of Di Beichen and the others, then there was no point in being happy right now. We also just arrived here today, and we encountered the scene that you guys encountered, said the old man. The magnetic voice was as calm as ever. Looking at Di Beichen's calm face, everyone inexplicably began to believe him. This news was undoubtedly extremely good news for everyone. Expressions of pleasant surprise quietly surfaced on everyone's faces. Since that's the case, let's go and take a look, someone suggested. Everyone couldn't wait any longer. Ever since they realized that the clouds were different, they couldn't wait to get here as soon as possible. However, they had to wait for so long to get here. Di Beichen and the others looked at each other. Everyone had a tacit understanding and pretended that they had never been here. Although it was a little depressing to have to share this treasure with everyone had already gained a lot in the past 3 days. The group continued forward and soon arrived at the area where the blood spirit stones were located. However, looking at the empty ground in front of them, everyone was stunned. Isn't there a red stone on the map? Why is there nothing here? Chapter 58:31. Facing everyone's questioning gazes, Bewitching calmly said, "This is also my first time here, so how would I know?" Hearing this indifferent question, everyone withdrew their gazes and continued to search the area. Since the red stone was drawn on the map, it should be here. However, no inheritance can be obtained so easily. Maybe this is a test. Chu Yingming analyzed the situation. He didn't doubt Bewitching's words. If Bewitching really obtained the inheritance here, then there was no need for him to hide it. Even if they knew this, their strength couldn't compare to Bewitching's group. Since he said so, it meant it was true. Therefore, Chu Yingming was very serious in his search. Not only him, but everyone present was also trying their best to find it. All of them were people who often went through experience and had gone through many tests. Although this kind of confusing situation didn't happen often, it wasn't unheard of. As long as they searched hard, they would eventually find it. In order not to be discovered, Bewitching's group also searched everywhere. Even though they knew the blood spirit stone only appeared at night, Nangong Yuqing ran for a long time and found that no one was chasing after him. He stopped and breathed a sigh of relief. Soon, the disciples of the Nangong family gathered together. Looking at the number of cultivators in the family, Nangong Yuqing's face became ashen. That damn Bewitching! Nangong Yuqing couldn't help but curse. He was about to explode in anger. On one hand, it was because Bewitching had gone too far. On the other hand, he was annoyed at his wrong decision. If it wasn't for his wrong judgment, this situation wouldn't have happened. "Young master, what should we do now?" Nangong Yuqing was silent for a moment, then waved his hand and said, "Let's go. We can only accept our bad luck today. It's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. In the future, we will have a chance to take revenge." He also wanted to go back, but thinking about the strength of the other party, going back was equivalent to suicide. Therefore, this was the only way. Originally, Nangong Yuqing's mood was extremely bad, but after seeing the situation of the Blue Cloud sect and Xiaoyao Palace, he felt somewhat comforted. This was because the other two sects had really suffered heavy losses. Everyone was trying to find the blood spirit stone, but they didn't find anything. However, they naturally found that the ground here was somewhat unusual, so they were sure that this place wasn't simple. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the potholes that appeared in front of her. This scene was really not ordinary. A few days ago, before they had discovered any clues, they had also used this stupid method. But the cruel reality told them that it was useless. Bewitching and Bailey Yanche were already sitting on the ground in a very free and easy manner, watching the sweaty digging while they themselves rested. However, at this moment a surprised voice was heard. "Look, there's something here." As soon as this was said, everyone's attention was drawn. Bewitching and the others looked at each other. They were somewhat surprised. Was this person's luck so good that he actually dug up a blood spirit stone during the day? Chapter 58:32. Look, what's this? The man looked at the rod in front of him and tried to pull it out with his hand. However, he realized that he could not move it no matter how hard he tried. This thing is so strange. It can't be pulled out at all. Some of the cultivators around them were eager to try as well. However, after a few more attempts, they helplessly confirmed that the rod could not be pulled out. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching looked at each other. Previously, they had not noticed the existence of this thing. Could it be that there were other inheritances here aside from the blood spirit stone? Morongjing and the others were also shocked. It seemed that their previous discovery was not thorough enough. If these people had not arrived, perhaps they would not have discovered this at all. I wonder what this thing is for. Linger frowned. I think this thing looks a little like a mechanism. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang turned to look again. She felt that Ling Er's words were not without reason. It does look a little similar. Bailey Hongzhuang then said to the man, "Why don't we try to dig deeper? Won't we find out what it is then?" "I have the same idea." The man chuckled. He no longer hesitated and immediately began to move. However, he wasn't the only one working this time. Everyone wanted to know what this thing was for. So they all began to dig around the location of the long rod. With so many people working together, their speed was naturally very impressive. In just a short while, the real situation appeared in front of everyone. So this thing isn't for pulling, it's for pushing. The man looked at the mechanism in front of him and pulled the rod. Hey! Everyone clearly did not expect the man to move so quickly. He did not even consider the consequences before he pulled the mechanism. In an instant, everyone quickly retreated and vigilantly observed the changes in their surroundings. No matter what happened, they would react immediately. Bailey Hongzhuang also looked around vigilantly. Even they did not know what this mechanism was for. Perhaps the blood spirit stone was only one of the treasures. There might be other inheritances underground that they had never thought of. Time gradually passed. Everyone was surprised to find that the hole that they had dug was gradually returning to its original state, as if it had never existed. What's going on? Are people not allowed to dig here? Everyone looked at each other. This situation was very strange. Chapter 58:33. Bailey Hongzhuang checked the ground again. However, this time, she found a blood spirit stone. After discovering this, she couldn't help but stare blankly. Only after double-checking did she realize that she hadn't seen wrongly. Everyone saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had started digging without saying anything. Doubt appeared in their eyes. What is Bailey Hongzhuang doing? I don't know. Could it be that she found something underground? Bailey Hongzhuang's movements were very fast. Not long after, she stopped digging and took out a dazzling fiery red stone. Red stone. After noticing this, everyone's eyes lit up. Didn't they come here for this red stone? Chen Feng looked at the blood spirit stone in Bailey Hongzhuang's hand in astonishment. He couldn't help but ask, "Hongzhuang, can I take a look at it?" Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and handed the blood spirit stone to Chen Feng. "Take a look. The origin energy contained in this thing is very abundant." After Chen Feng took the blood spirit stone, he felt the incomparably pure origin energy. His calm face couldn't hide his pleasant surprise. The origin energy in this thing is even more amazing than a high-grade spirit stone. Although the people around him couldn't feel it, just hearing Chen Feng's words filled them with excitement. A treasure even more amazing than a high-grade spirit stone. This thing might not be comparable to some heavenly treasures, but for cultivators, this was what they needed the most. So this is the red stone on the map. Chu Yingming couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. It seemed like they had come to the right place. There was actually such a treasure underground. "Miss Bailey, how did you find this red stone?" A cultivator asked tentatively. Not only the others, even Jiang Wenyan, and the others were curious. A few days ago when they were here, they had done some research. As long as it was daytime, it was impossible to find a blood spirit stone. Use your spiritual energy to sense the ground. The blood spirit stone is right here, Bailey Hongzhuang said. This was actually not a secret. Everyone had tried it before. But she discovered that the reason why she could find it underground was because it happened after the switch was turned on. As Bailey Hongzhuang finished speaking, everyone tried to use their mental energy to check. This ground is really strange. There doesn't seem to be anything special about it, but it's really too difficult for my mental power to penetrate it. My mental power can only penetrate 2 meters. I can't go any further than that. Bewitching also used his mind power to sense the ground. Soon he discovered a blood spirit stone. At the same time, many cultivators also gained something. Surprised voices could be heard one after another. Although this excavation situation was very different from everyone's usual image, everyone was still immersed in it. Such a harvest was simply too delightful. Why did the situation change after the switch was turned on? Linger frowned slightly. This situation was good, but it was completely different from what they had experienced yesterday. Bailey Hongzhuang had a conjecture in her mind. Just as she was about to speak, she heard Bewitching say, "Perhaps this is a place specially used to train mental strength." "I think so too." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. "This ground has a great resistance to mental power, and the blood spirit stone is underground. If we don't know where the blood spirit stone is and directly dig it out, who knows how much time we'll waste." Chapter 5834. Mental power was also known as spiritual sense. For cultivators, it was undoubtedly one of the most important methods. When the situation in front of one's eyes could not be seen clearly with the naked eye, mental power would play a huge role. To a certain extent, momentum and pressure were inseparable from mental power. In many situations, mental power would be used. Once mental power was increased, a cultivator's sensitivity would also increase greatly. However, if one wanted to increase their cultivation, they could cultivate. If they wanted to increase their mental power, the process was much more complicated than other methods. Many cultivators found it very difficult to increase their mental power, and they could not even find the corresponding method. Bailey Hongzhuang also had an urgent need to increase her mental power. If she wanted to summon other stronger contracted beasts, or increase the number of contracted beasts, she needed stronger mental power. Previously, she had used medicinal pills to increase her mental power. Indeed, she had made considerable progress. Unfortunately, heaven and earth treasures to increase one's mental power were hard to come by. Even if she had refined some medicinal pills back then, she had squandered them all in a short period of time. Of course, her mental power was much stronger than before. When she used the method again, she could extend the time by a lot. The increase in mental power was far slower than the increase in cultivation. Although the increase in cultivation could lead to some improvement in mental power, the best method was still to cultivate mental power. The situation in front of them seemed to be a place specially set up to increase mental power. Even if it was not confirmed, Bailey Hongzhuang felt that this was the closest judgment to the truth. The reason why they had not been in such a situation a few days ago was because they did not find any mechanism. This place is specially set up to increase mental power? Murong Jing was a little surprised. Normally, there were many training places used to increase one's strength, but there were very few mechanisms that could be used to increase mental power. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. You can try to use your mental power to penetrate the ground to look for blood spirit stones. In the process of searching, your mental power will be consumed much faster than usual. The feeling of exhausting your mental power is very uncomfortable. However, every time it's completely exhausted, your mental power will recover and increase slightly. Di Beichen also spoke up. I see. Jiang Wenyan understood. Although they had never experienced such a situation before, they had to admit that if all of this was true, then it was indeed a good opportunity to increase their spiritual power. If they could take advantage of this opportunity to improve themselves, it would be of great help to everyone. Chapter 5835. This area was extremely large. Even though there were so many cultivators gathered here, it still seemed very spacious and empty. Because of this, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but sigh at the generosity of the Immortal Region's cultivators. She didn't know how they'd made this land so special, but it was already very rare for them to think of such a method. Sure enough, no matter what they wanted to improve, there was a corresponding method. It was just that they hadn't found it before. Everyone lowered their heads and searched. After obtaining the first blood spirit stone, everyone understood that it was an excellent treasure. Compared to searching aimlessly in other places, it was better to stay here. After all, the harvest here could be seen. Night slowly fell. Bailey Hongzhuang originally wondered if the blood spirit stones would be as active as before. However, when the time was up, that situation didn't appear again. This was the change after the switch was pressed. It could be used to train mental power, but the speed at which they obtained blood spirit stones was undoubtedly much slower. I think that it wasn't a bad thing that we didn't find the switch before. Otherwise, if we wanted to collect as many blood spirit stones as we did before. I'm afraid that we'd have to stay here for a long time. Morongjing lowered his voice. Although they could search for blood spirit stones all day long now, they had to expend a lot more energy than before. Once their mental power was exhausted, they had to sit down and rest. Mental power recovered slower than origin power, so they could only recover by sleeping. This process was undoubtedly much longer. I think so too, haha. Jiang Wenyan chuckled. However, since it can improve our mental power, it's also very good. We'll just treat it as training. Morongjing nodded slightly. However, this feeling of exhausting our mental power is really unpleasant. Just as the two of them were discussing the top-heavy situation after exhausting their mental power, Bewitching's voice suddenly rang out. After increasing your mental power, if someone wants to take over your body, it'll be very difficult. If your mental power is strong enough, you might be able to directly destroy your opponent's soul. Morongjing and Jiang Wenyan's expressions instantly changed. They no longer had any thoughts of complaining. When they thought about how Jun Lingxuan had fallen into such a situation, their hearts trembled. This kind of death was too cruel. No one could accept it. Although the process of increasing one's mental strength was very painful, with such benefits, what was there to complain about? The amount of mental power consumed by the soil was astonishing. In addition, blood spirit stones were buried at different depths. Usually, blood spirit stones within 2 meters of each other were easily discovered. Unfortunately, there were only a few blood spirit stones at this depth. More blood spirit stones were buried even deeper. Therefore, after searching for a while, it became difficult to find them again. When Bailey Hongzhuang took out another blood spiritual stone from the ground, the cultivator beside her was in disbelief. I searched there before, but I didn't see any blood spirit stones. He had just walked over from that area. He was still wondering why Bailey Hongzhuang had gone there, but the result made him blush. Don't be silly. Isn't this simple? It must be because Bailey Hongzhuang's spiritual power is stronger than yours, so she can penetrate deeper and see the blood spirit stones. Chapter 5836. Even with his spiritual power, he felt as if he had encountered an extremely hard rock after penetrating 2 meters into the ground. No matter how hard he tried, he could not penetrate it. For cultivators, there might be differences in cultivation and combat strength, but the difference in spiritual power was not that great. After all, no one had a way to increase their spiritual power. They had always improved their cultivation along with it. It was too difficult to be much stronger than ordinary people. Don't forget that Bailey Hongzhuang is a grade 9 alchemist. Alchemists have stronger spiritual power than ordinary people like us. Moreover, she is the saint of the light. The woman beside him raised her eyebrows. Although she did not want to admit it, she had to admit that Bailey Hongzhuang was so outstanding that it made people envious. In the past, Xiao Shou had been crowned as the saint of the light for so many years. Everyone had thought that she was just lucky. Her true strength had never been as outstanding as the Saint of the Light. However, when Bailey Hongzhuang became the Saint of the Light, what everyone cared about the most was not the title, but herself. This was because her brilliance was already more dazzling than the title of Saint of the Light. It is understandable that Bailey Hongzhuang is like this, but why is Bewitching doing the same? The man's lips twitched. Bewitching was not an alchemist, nor was he of the light attribute. However, he was not any slower than Bailey Hongzhuang when it came to collecting blood spirit stones. Usually, people would be lucky if they could find one blood spirit stone in an area that was 10 meters wide. Bewitching was not like that at all. He dug here and there. Every time he dug, he would find a blood spirit stone. When he was lucky, he would even find several blood spirit stones at once. This could not be all luck, right? The woman was stunned. She did not know how to explain this situation. Look at those two. The man pointed at by Li Yanche and Ling who were not far away. He had first noticed them because of their outstanding appearance. Later, he had been paying attention to them because of their speed. Fortunately, other than these 4 people, everyone else's performance was very normal. This made them believe that it wasn't that they were too weak, but that their spiritual power was ridiculously strong. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others are people who can't be judged by common sense. Look at Morongjing, Chu Yingming, and the others, aren't they similar? Just think of it that way. You'll feel better. Morongjing, Chu Yingming. After the first cultivator started to rest due to the lack of mental strength, the other cultivators also started to rest due to the exhaustion of their mental strength. After exhausting their mental strength, everyone's faces were no longer as spirited as before. Exhaustion was written all over their faces. Normally, he wouldn't feel this uncomfortable even if his elemental energy was depleted. However, after his mental energy was depleted, it was as if he hadn't rested for a long time. His head hurt, as if it was being pricked by needles. Everyone was not used to this feeling. They all sat down and rested with their hands on their heads. As her mental strength was gradually depleted, Bailey Hongzhuang also felt that her head was very uncomfortable. However, she knew that she had to completely squeeze out all of her mental strength. Only then could her mental strength increase. One by one, the blood spirit stones were taken out, and Bailey Hongzhuang placed them in the primordial chaos ring. These things were very helpful for increasing their strength. Chapter 58:37. Even if they were doing this for the sake of strengthening their strength in the future, they couldn't fall too far behind when so many people had already broken through. Sigh, I can't do it anymore. Jiang Wenyan waved his hand and sat down limply. This feeling of powerlessness was too unbearable. Morongjing looked at Jiang Wenyan and said with a smile, I can't do it anymore either. However, look at Bewitching and the rest. With this comparison, you can see where the gap is. At this moment, apart from Bewitching's group of 4, only Chen Feng was still practicing. This proved that not only were they stronger than ordinary people, even their spiritual energy was stronger. Haha, I used to call myself a genius. Now that I compare them, I realize that I'm not. Jiang Wenyan shook his head and sighed. He was also a first-rate genius in the Jiang family. All these years, in order to live up to his position as the young master, he had never slacked off in his cultivation. However, when facing Bewitching and the rest, the pride in his heart disappeared. Perhaps if it were someone else, he would also feel jealous. However, when facing Bewitching, he only felt admiration. He knew that Bewitching and the rest must have been extremely hard-working in their cultivation. That breathtaking sword, that terrifying sword qi, he had never seen anything like it, even in the hands of his elders. He believed that such a sword could only be used after thousands of tempering. For Bewitching to be able to master it at such a young age, the amount of time and energy he had spent must be terrifying. If Bewitching knew what Jiang Wenyan was thinking, he would definitely shake his head. In the past few days, they did nothing but practice their sword during the day. However, compared to Zhongli Mu, his sword was nothing. Whether it was sword qi or power, it was far inferior. Only after seeing Zhongli Mu's sword would they understand what true sword qi was. Chen Feng looked at Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4, and couldn't help but smile. My master once said that my spiritual energy is different from ordinary people, much stronger than cultivators of the same level. Now it seems like your spiritual energy is even more terrifying. Birds of a feather flock together. Bewitching raised his eyebrows, and his lips curled into a devilish smile. Chen Feng blanked before a bright smile appeared on his face. That's right. Birds of a feather flock together. After a while, even they couldn't hold on any longer. After exhausting the last of her mental strength, Bailey Hongzhuang's face turned pale, and she felt extremely uncomfortable. She tried her best to control herself, and sat down at the side. She closed her eyes and began to rest. The blood spirit stone was in her possession. As her cultivation increased, the benefits of the demon summoning scripture, a heaven-defying cultivation method, also became more apparent. Even if she was sleeping, the demon summoning scripture would still automatically circulate and increase her cultivation. Of course, this speed wasn't as fast as when he was cultivating, but it wasn't too slow either. In the long run, the effects would be quite significant. Moreover, He had the pure energy of the blood spirit stone beside him. Bailey Hongzhuang's small action attracted the attention of several people. They were somewhat stunned, not understanding what Bailey Hongzhuang was doing. Only people familiar with Di Beichen's group knew that Di Beichen's situation was somewhat similar to Bailey Hongzhuang's. After transforming into a heavenly physique, he was blessed by the heavens in terms of cultivation. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.